The first time my mother placed her hand on my pregnant belly, I thought everything had finally changed. For months, she had barely looked at me unless it was to compare me with my younger sister, Melissa. Every achievement of mine somehow became another reason to praise her instead. When I graduated first in my class, Mom said Melissa had a sweeter personality. When I bought my own home without anyone's help, Dad joked that success meant nothing if nobody actually liked me. I learned long ago that in our family, love wasn't earned. It was assigned, and it had never been assigned to me. So when Mom smiled that afternoon and gently rubbed my stomach, I almost believed we were getting a second chance. "You're glowing," she whispered. I smiled despite myself. "Thanks, Mom." Then she leaned closer. "You know," she said quietly, "Melissa deserves to experience becoming a mother first." The words made me blink. "What?" She laughed as though I had misunderstood. "I'm only saying life isn't always fair." I should have recognized the warning hidden inside that sentence. Instead, I invited them all to dinner the following Saturday. My husband Ethan squeezed my hand while setting the table. "You sure about this?" he asked. "They're trying." He looked toward the dining room where my parents laughed with Melissa. "I hope you're right." I hoped so too. Melissa arrived wearing another expensive dress our parents had paid for. She hugged me carefully, making sure everyone noticed. "I still can't believe you're pregnant before me. You'll have your turn." Her smile disappeared for only a second. I should have been first. Nobody corrected her. Dinner began peacefully enough. Dad talked about retirement. Mom complimented the food. Melissa spent most of the evening scrolling through baby furniture on her phone, loudly announcing which nursery themes she wanted when it finally happened. Then Mom lifted her wineglass. A toast. Everyone looked up. "To Melissa," she said proudly. Ethan frowned. "For what?" Mom smiled. "For the wonderful mother she'll become." Silence settled over the table. I forced a laugh. "And, to the baby who's actually coming." Mom barely glanced at me. "Well, yes, of course." Dad cleared his throat. "But timing matters." Ethan slowly placed his fork down. "What exactly does that mean?" Melissa sighed dramatically. "It means some people always have to steal everyone else's moment." I stared at her. "Excuse me." She pointed directly at my stomach. "You knew I've been trying." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I didn't get pregnant to compete with you. You always compete." "I've never competed with you." "You won again." Dad nodded as though she had made perfect sense. "You've always been selfish, Claire." The room suddenly felt smaller. Ethan stood. "I think that's enough." Mom ignored him. "You couldn't wait." I laughed in disbelief. "You think pregnancies are scheduled to hurt someone's feelings?" Melissa's eyes filled with tears almost instantly. "I prayed every night." Mom wrapped an arm around her. "There, sweetheart." Then she looked at me with the cold expression I remembered from childhood. "You've taken enough from your sister." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "What exactly have I taken?" "Our attention." I almost laughed. "You've never given me any." Nobody answered, because they knew I was right. Melissa suddenly slammed both hands onto the table. "I was supposed to have the first grandchild." The words echoed through the dining room. I slowly stood. "This conversation is over." Mom's face twisted with anger. "No." She stepped toward me. "If something happened now." Ethan instantly moved between us. "What did you just say?" Mom's voice became frighteningly calm. "The first grandchild must be hers." Before either of us could react, Dad grabbed Ethan's shoulder and shoved him backward. Everything happened in seconds. Mom lunged toward me. Melissa didn't stop her. She stepped aside. Then Dad's fist drove straight into my stomach. Pain exploded through my entire body. I screamed. Before I could fall, Mom struck my belly again with both hands. "The first grandchild must be hers." I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, unable to breathe. Ethan roared louder than I had ever heard. He tackled Dad away from me. Melissa stood frozen, not horrified, watching. Mom raised her foot as if to kick me again. "You've ruined everything." Ethan threw himself over me just in time. "Call 911, he shouted. My vision blurred. Warmth spread beneath me. I looked down. Blood. So much blood. "No," I whispered. "Please. Not my baby. Not after everything." The room dissolved into screams. Dad yelled that none of this would have happened if I hadn't been selfish. Mom kept crying that Melissa deserved to be first. Even lying there, bleeding onto my own kitchen floor, I realized something that somehow hurt more than the physical pain. If saving my child meant choosing between me and Melissa, they would choose Melissa, every single time. Then, through the chaos, the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 slow, deliberate chimes. Everyone froze. Ethan looked toward the front door without taking his body off mine. I swear if that's another one of your relatives. But the ringing continued, steady, patient, almost as if whoever stood outside already knew exactly what had happened inside the house. Mom's face suddenly lost all its color. Dad's breathing became uneven. Melissa whispered, "No, it can't be." For the first time that entire night, fear appeared on all 3 of their faces. And I had no idea why. Ethan never took his eyes off my face. "Stay with me, Claire. Don't close your eyes." The doorbell rang again. This time it was followed by a firm knock. "Open the door." A man's voice echoed through the hallway. Dad's face drained of every trace of confidence. Mom grabbed Melissa's arm so tightly she winced. "Don't answer it," Mom whispered. Ethan glared at them. "Are you out of your minds?" He reached for his phone with one hand while keeping the other pressed against my bleeding stomach. "I've already called 911. The knocking grew louder. "This is the sheriff's office. Open the door." Dad staggered backward. They weren't supposed to come today." My head spun from the pain, but those words cut through the haze. "Weren't supposed to." Melissa's lips trembled. Mom shot her a warning look. "Say nothing." Ethan stared at them in disbelief. "What have you done?" No one answered. The front door suddenly swung open. Our neighbor, Mrs. Harper, had apparently unlocked it after hearing the screaming outside. 2 sheriff's deputies rushed in behind her, followed by a woman in a gray business suit carrying a leather folder. The deputies took one look at me lying in a pool of blood. Nobody moved. Dad instinctively raised his hands. "It was an accident." One deputy looked at Ethan. "What happened?" "My father-in-law punched my pregnant wife. Her mother attacked her too." The deputy's expression hardened instantly. The woman in the gray suit slowly looked around the room before her eyes settled on my parents. "So," she said quietly, "I arrived just in time." Mom's knees nearly gave out. The woman introduced herself. "My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm a court-appointed forensic accountant." I frowned, barely able to stay conscious. A forensic accountant? What did that have to do with any of this? Rebecca opened her folder. "I've been investigating financial abuse involving the Whitmore family for the past 6 months." Dad's mouth opened. "You have no right." "I have every right." She removed several documents. 3 anonymous reports claimed that your oldest daughter had been systematically deprived of assets left to her by her late grandmother. I blinked. "My grandmother?" Rebecca looked at me with visible sympathy. "You didn't know." It wasn't a question. I shook my head weakly. "My grandmother left everything to Mom." Rebecca slowly turned another page. "No." The room fell silent. "Your grandmother rewrote her will 11 months before she passed away." Mom closed her eyes. Rebecca continued. "She divided her estate equally between both granddaughters after discovering years of favoritism." I couldn't breathe. "What?" "The estate included investment accounts, trust funds, and a lakeside property." I stared at my mother. "You told me Grandma died broke." Mom refused to meet my eyes. Rebecca nodded. "That was false." Dad suddenly shouted, "This has nothing to do with tonight." "It has everything to do with tonight," Rebecca replied. "According to bank records, the money belonging to Claire was quietly transferred into accounts controlled by Melissa over several years." Melissa burst into tears. "I didn't ask for it." Rebecca calmly pulled out another document. "Actually, you signed every transfer." Melissa stopped crying. The deputies exchanged glances. Rebecca wasn't finished. "We also recovered text messages." She looked directly at Melissa. "If Claire has a baby first, she'll never fight us over the inheritance because she'll be distracted." My stomach twisted despite the pain. Melissa whispered, "You hacked my phone." "No, your former fiancé voluntarily provided a backup after learning how you treated your sister." I remembered. Daniel. He had disappeared from Melissa's life without explanation nearly a year earlier. She'd claimed he was controlling. Now I wondered how much of that had been another lie. Rebecca read another message aloud. "Mom says once I have the first grandchild, everyone will forget Claire anyway." Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. Then another sentence. "If she loses the baby, maybe that's fate." Ethan's entire body shook with rage. "You knew." He looked from Melissa to my parents. "You all planned this." Mom screamed, "We never planned violence." Rebecca closed the folder. "No, but years of manipulation have consequences." The ambulance crew rushed through the front door. One paramedic immediately knelt beside me. "We need to move her now." As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Our baby." His eyes filled with tears, but he forced a hopeful smile. "We're not giving up." The ambulance doors slammed shut moments later. Sirens wailed as we sped toward the hospital. Every bump in the road sent agony through my body. I kept talking to my unborn child inside my mind. "Please, stay with me. Please don't leave me." Doctors flooded the emergency room the second we arrived. Bright lights passed overhead as they rushed me through endless hallways. Someone kept repeating my name. Someone else asked about allergies. Then everything faded. When I finally opened my eyes again, the room was quiet. Machines beeped softly beside me. For one terrifying second, I was too afraid to ask. Ethan noticed I was awake. He immediately stood and took my hand. His eyes were red from crying. I searched his face. "Our baby." He smiled through tears. "The heartbeat is still there." I broke down completely. Relief crashed over me so hard I could barely breathe. The doctors explained that I had suffered severe trauma, but somehow our little fighter had survived. I kissed Ethan's hand over and over. For the first time since the attack, I allowed myself to believe we might actually have a future. Then there was another knock. Not loud, gentle. Rebecca Lawson stepped into the room. "There are a few things you deserve to know." She placed another folder on my bedside table. "I wasn't investigating your parents because of the inheritance." I frowned. "Then why?" She took a slow breath. "Because someone hired me." "Who?" Rebecca gave me a small, knowing smile. "The person who rang your doorbell tonight wasn't just following up on an investigation." She slid a faded photograph from the folder. The moment I saw the woman's face, my heart stopped. She looked almost exactly like my late grandmother. Only younger, only alive. Rebecca spoke softly. "Claire, before you decide what to do next, you need to know the truth about the woman you've believed was dead for the last 25 years. My hands trembled so violently that Ethan had to steady the photograph for me. The woman smiled warmly at the camera, her arm wrapped around my grandmother. On the back, written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting, were the words, "My daughters, Evelyn and Grace. Together forever." I stared at Rebecca. My grandmother only had one daughter. Rebecca gently shook her head. "No, she had two." My heartbeat quickened. "Grace was the older sister. Evelyn was your mother." I looked back at the photograph, unable to understand. "Then, who is Grace?" Rebecca's expression softened. "The woman your mother told everyone had died in a car accident 25 years ago." A chill ran through me. "She didn't die." "No." Rebecca took a slow breath. "She left after discovering your parents had forged financial documents and manipulated your grandmother for years. Before she could report them, they spread the story that she had abandoned the family. Eventually, everyone believed she was gone." I covered my mouth. "So, she's alive." Rebecca smiled. "She's been alive this entire time." Just then, another gentle knock came from the hospital doorway. An elderly woman stepped inside with silver hair, kind eyes, and a quiet dignity that filled the room before she spoke. The second our eyes met, something inside me shifted. She looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, Claire." I didn't know why, but I immediately reached for her. She hurried to my bedside and held my hand as if she'd waited decades for that moment. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I tried to find you. I couldn't stop crying." You're Grace." She nodded. "I promised your grandmother I'd protect you one day. I just arrived a few minutes too late." She gently brushed my hair away from my face. "I heard everything the deputies recorded in that house." For several moments, neither of us spoke. It felt strangely peaceful, like finding a missing piece of my life I never knew existed. Over the next several weeks, the truth unraveled faster than I could have imagined. The deputies' body cameras had captured my parents screaming, "The first grandchild must be hers," moments before they attacked me. Our dining room security camera, one Ethan had installed months earlier after several packages had gone missing, recorded the entire assault from beginning to end. There was no denying what happened. The recording spread through every courtroom hearing. Family friends who had defended my parents for years sat in stunned silence. Neighbors who once called me the difficult daughter finally understood why I had kept my distance. But the greatest shock came from people who had worked with my grandmother before she passed away. One after another, they came forward with journals, letters, and handwritten notes. Every page told the same heartbreaking story. She had seen the favoritism. She had argued with my parents. She had begged them to love both daughters equally. In her final journal entry, she wrote, "If Claire ever reads this, I hope she knows none of this was her fault." Some people mistake control for love. I pray she never does. I cried harder reading those words than I had during the attack. Because someone had finally said what I'd needed to hear my entire life. Months later, the criminal case concluded. The evidence spoke louder than any excuse. My parents were held fully accountable for the assault and the years of financial fraud that followed. Melissa's signed transfers and messages made it impossible for her to claim ignorance. The court ordered that every dollar belonging to me be restored, along with the income it should have earned over the years. When reporters gathered outside the courthouse, microphones stretched toward me. "Do you hate your family?" I looked toward the building where my parents had disappeared through the courthouse doors. For a long moment, I remembered birthdays where my presents had been given to Melissa. School plays where my seat was empty because they never came. Graduation day. My wedding. The night they chose jealousy over my child. Then I answered, "I don't hate them." The reporters waited. I simply refused to carry what belongs to them anymore. It wasn't forgiveness. It was freedom. A few months after the trial, Ethan and I welcomed our daughter into the world. The moment I held her, every promise I'd ever made to myself became real. She would never wonder if she was enough. She would never have to earn our love. She would never compete with another child for affection. Grace stood beside me in the hospital room, smiling through happy tears. "Have you chosen a name?" I nodded. "We're naming her Hope." Grace covered her face and cried. "Your grandmother would have loved that." Life slowly settled into something I had never experienced before. Peace. The inheritance funded a foundation in my grandmother's name that provided emergency legal and financial assistance to adults escaping abusive family control. Watching people rebuild their lives from situations that once felt impossible reminded me that justice isn't only about exposing wrongdoing. It's also about creating opportunities for healing. One autumn afternoon, Ethan and I took little Hope to the lakeside property that had always been meant to be part of my future. Golden leaves drifted across the water. Hope laughed as Ethan lifted her toward the sky. Grace sat nearby, knitting quietly with a smile that never seemed to leave her face anymore. I watched the people beside me and realized something beautiful. The family I'd spent my entire childhood begging for had never truly existed. But the family standing beside me now was real. Built on honesty instead of fear. On kindness instead of comparison. On love instead of conditions. As the sun began to set, my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. I opened the message. It contained only one sentence. "Can you ever forgive us?" There was no signature. There didn't need to be one. I looked at Hope chasing butterflies across the grass with Ethan pretending he couldn't catch her. I thought about the years that had been stolen from me. Then I quietly locked my phone without replying. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted the last word. But because silence was finally the answer they had spent a lifetime teaching me. For the first time, it no longer hurt. I turned away from the past, picked up my daughter, and walked toward the people who had chosen to love me. This time, no one asked me to compete for my place. I already belonged.